Welcome. This video is going to be talking about tables. And somebody might think, well, there's just a table in a database, but there are a lot of different types of tables, and sometimes they can get confusing. So we have a base table, a temp table, a view, a derived table. We have table-valued functions, and those can either be inline or multi-statement. And there can be a user-defined table type and table variables. When we look at base tables, that's what we most commonly think of, and that's going to be a physical structure. Most people say table, that's what they think of. And tables are objects that contain the data in a row and column format. Here's an example of the definition for a base table, and that's a create table, each of our attributes, and each of the data types. If we have foreign keys or primary keys, those are also defined. So that's a physical table, a base table, or just a table. This is what a table looks like after it's been created, and this is in the design view. So we see the same exact columns and the same exact data types, and we see that this is a primary key. In fact, here's the data that is in that table. So that's all the data in a base table. A temp table is just like a base table, but the scope and where it's stored and how long it lasts is different. A temp table can be local or it can be global. Temp tables are useful when there are perhaps millions of rows in a table and a small subset of those are needed. So instead of filtering the data again and again to get the subset in a regular query, perhaps, the data is filtered once and stored in the temp table. Now, a local temp table means that it's available for use only in the current session. It's local because there's a single hashtag in front of the table name. When you disconnect or end a session, then the local temp table is removed. Once we've defined it, this one's called small stocks. We can query hashtag small stocks. So we use tempdb, that's where the local temp tables are stored, and we can select star then from hashtag small stocks. If you right click on tempdb and you go to temporary tables, you can then see this is my local temp table. So let's execute the query here that is going to put the ticker symbol, trade date, the stock closing price, and the volume into this temporary table called hashtag small stocks. And we're just grabbing data for Apple, Ford, and Google here. We're going to put it into this temp table. So I execute the query, and that's going to be in our temp table. I select star from hashtag small stocks, and it runs. If I come to the temp DB, right click on temporary tables and choose refresh, click the plus, I can see the hashtag small stocks here. So that's going to last as long as I'm using this session, and it's only good for this session. So we'll run the global table here, just as we did the local. And then we'll do the select star from small stocks to see that it worked. Again, notice that there's two hashtags. If I right click and refresh, you notice that I have two temporary tables, one global and one local. The global temp table looks virtually the same as did the local. The only difference you'll see is that there's two pound signs here, or hashtags, as opposed to one. And then the big difference then is it's available to any session as long as the session that created the table is active. The next table type to consider is a view. People have often heard of views, and that's probably one of the most common things that people use. A view doesn't contain any data. It's not a table that's stored, but a view is constructed at runtime and is essentially a set of queries applied against either base tables, views, or both. A view is a database object that's very frequently used for security purposes or permissions. So someone might define a view and then give several people access to that view through their permissions. Here is an example of a view. Notice that it looks very much like a regular select from where group by having. It's just a normal query, but now we have a permanent object, and that object name is VH1. Now we can either write a query against that view, or in this example, we join the table company information to the view VH1. Here is our view VH1 that is in SQL Server. Now we notice that it is a regular select from where query for the year 2020, and we want the average closing price for each ticker symbol greater than or equal to $100. It creates an object called VH1, but that table is not full of data. It just becomes full of data at runtime or when we use it. So if I query that view now, and let's highlight this and execute, we get 27 different companies that qualifies. What we did is we joined our view VH1 to our company information table, and then we took the ticker symbol, company name, city, state, and average close. Some of those things came from company information, like company name, city, state, and the ticker symbol, and the average closing price came from VH1. So that's a view and then a query on a view. Our next table type is an inline table valued function. Now there are two types of table valued function, and they're inline and they're multiple statement. Now a user-defined function returns a table data type and it can accept parameters, whereas a view does not allow for parameters. A table value function is used in the from clause in select from where statements, so we use those just like queries. Here's an example, and here's the function itself. The function's called UDF. I put that as user-defined function underscore stocks volume. I have one parameter here, it's volume level, and it's an integer. This function returns a table, and here is the definition of that table. I'm selecting ticker symbol, closing price, volume, and I'm looking for those instances where the volume is greater than or equal to the number that I'm going to input. So here is the query that uses the user-defined function, or it's an inline table valued function in this case. And I input, or I put 20 million as my parameter. Let's compare an inline table valued function to a multi-statement table valued function. This is a function that returns the result of multiple statements. So you can have several queries together inside the function, and the aggregate of all those queries are returned in a table. So an MSTVF returns a table variable as the return value. And then the data from the query is inserted into the table variable. So let's take a look here at a specific function. And I know the type is just a little small, but the function is called UDF stocks volume, and we create the function, and we're going to return a table right here. And it's a subset of some of the attributes in the stocks table. So this is what we're going to return, and this is the query that's going to build it. So we insert into @stocks, and that's our table variable, and we select ticker symbol, trade date, open, close, volume, and we're looking for Apple, Ford, and Google. We do a similar query here, insert these into the table variable, and this is going to be for ExxonMobil and Target. When we get done, we can simply query using the function in the from clause. So here's the inline table valued function, and we're going to build that. So we highlight the whole function, we click execute, we know that it's completed successfully. If I right click on functions, refresh, do table valued functions, there's the one that I just built. Now, what's happening is we're going to pass it a volume level, and we're going to pass 20 million here in the query we do. We're also going to look for closing prices greater than $25. But as far as the function is concerned, we're passing the parameter 20 million. We want only stocks that have had on a daily basis 20 million or more shares. So we execute, and we see that that worked just well. So that's how you use a function. It's inside of a select from where, and this is, again, is a user-defined function. Here's our function for the multi-statement table valued function. It returns a type of table, as you see, and again, we're choosing Apple, Ford, and Google in the first part of the insert statement. The second part of the insert statement into the same table, that's our table variable, we are going to insert ExxonMobil and Target. So let's go ahead, create the function, and then we'll use it in context here. So we use it in a select star from, and we're going to use the user defined function that we've created. So let's execute that. And we see with the answer here at the bottom, it works just fine. So that's a multi-statement table valued function. It gives us a lot of flexibility, and we're able to build that table at runtime. The next category of tables is a user-defined table type. SQL Server gives the user-defined table type as a method to create a predefined temp table. They're defined as objects, so they can be passed as parameters or variables from one query to another. A user-defined data type is read-only, and it can be passed as a parameter to a stored procedure. Additionally, it is very strongly typed. The user-defined table type cannot be modified after it's created, and user-defined functions cannot be called within the definition of computed columns of a user-defined table type. Here is the SQL to create a user-defined table type. Notice that we specify the database, and then we create a table type. Now this is a complex data type. It's called location table type, and it's going to have industry, phone number, address, city, state, and zip code. Once we've declared a new table type, we can declare a variable that here is at locations that's of that type. And this is a simple insert into this variable, which is of a table type, and it has the ticker symbol, the industry, the phone number, the address, the city, state, and zip. And then we can query this variable at locations as if it were any other table. A more complex version of a user-defined table type would be when we insert into our location table type variable, and we do that from an existing table. So we insert into our at locations, and then we select the following attributes from company information, and then we do a select star from at location. So that's a way to populate our table variable from an existing table. So let's build these table types in SQL Server. So first, we'll specify the database and create the type as we mentioned before. We click Execute, come over here to Types under Programmability. So we go to Programmability, Types, right-click on User-Defined Table Types, refresh, and see that the location table type now appears. Now we'll declare at locations to be of that type. We'll put one row into at locations, and then we will select it. We look at the results. We will see that we have one row, and that's Occidental Petroleum, Oil and Gas. We capture a phone number, an address, a city, a state. So that's the first basic version. And here is the slightly more advanced version. Again, we declare a variable at locations to be of the new table type. We insert into the table variable at locations, and we specify each of these attributes that come from the company information table. So the company information table populates our table variable. Then I can say select star from at locations. As I execute that, I can see all of the data here at the bottom, all 100 rows that came from company information. So that is the user-defined table types in declaring table variables. Our last category of tables is a table variable. Now, table variables are like other types of local variables, but these have rows of data. They actually have more limitations than temp tables. So you could do a table variable or a temp table, but we have more limitations than does a temp table. SQL Server drops the table variable at the end of the batch. That's an advantage. Temp tables, again, are physically created in the TempDB database and has constraints and indexes, whereas a table variable acts like a variable and exists, again, just for the life of the batch. Here is an example of a table variable, and it's going to have some similarities to some of the other constructs we've seen. Here we declare at company information to be of type table. So it's just a table type. Then we can insert into our table variable, and this time I did a select from company information to populate my variable, and then I can say select star from company location. So here is our table variable in SQL Server, and it's the same code. The table variable is at company location, and we'll just run this whole thing and we'll see the select star here at the end. So we execute it, and these are very slick because it's not creating a physical structure, so I can do all of the code at once. So if I go look at the results here, we see that I have all of the 100 rows inserted to the table variable that came from my company information table. And I can use that variable in a lot of different ways in a stored procedure. So table variables are very flexible. They have a lot of power if you're going to move through several stored procedures, and you don't have to worry about them leaving any trails of files anywhere on the database. In conclusion, there are many options when you need to use a table in SQL Server. For example, if you want to work inside of a select from where statement, then a function of some type is best. If you need to reuse the same table structure over and over in lots of different situations, then a user-defined table type would be best. If you need to pass the table structure to several different stored procedures, then a table variable might be your best option. I did not cover derived tables or common table expressions. I will do those in another video. A derived table or a common table expression is a structure in the from clause. A derived table is simply a subquery in the from clause. So we define a table and maybe apply a filter or something to it. Common table expression does the same exact thing, but it pulls it out of the from clause, puts it in a with statement to define the table in a special way. I'll cover those separately. Again, those are coming off of a base table and they're a bit of a different topic. Enjoy!